Hey, welcome back. When I was in high school, I was an athlete. I played football and basketball, and my high school's mascot was the Timberwolves. And like many other high schools, we take our mascots literally and find ways to use them to motivate. And our idea of using the wolf was to create unity amongst each other. And we specifically quoted a section from the famous book, The Jungle Book, which said this: "The strength of the wolf is in the pack, but the strength of the pack is in the wolf." See, wolves are famous for being intense and incredible hunters, and they do this in packs. It's together that they are strong, not on their own, but each wolf is reliant on the strengths that the other one has. So because of that, while no wolf is greater than the other wolf, it's their individuality that makes them strong, together when that's all combined. And what a great illustration this is for the Roman Empire, maybe the greatest unified empire of the ancient world, and many argue in all of world history. Not only were wolves important to the genesis of Rome, as they believed that Romulus and Remus were raised by wolves, but it's this idea of courage and strength and self-sacrifice that together through unity, an empire gets strong. But what happens in a wolf pack if one wolf gains more power than the other wolves? What happens when one wolf goes away from the pack or tries to entirely lead the pack on its own? Chances are that pack isn't going to be as successful because it doesn't have the unity that made it what it was originally. And the same thing could be true for Rome. What happens when one person gains too much power? Remember, the purpose of a republic was to prevent that exact thing from happening. But guess what? It happens. Let's go. Where we last left Rome in about 186 BC, they had just defeated their rival Carthage and became masters of the Mediterranean Sea. And with that, Rome had begun its transformation as a small city-state and republic into a massive empire. Because Rome didn't stop with Carthage. From then on, it began to conquer anything else around it because of this idea of expansion or death. And quickly, Rome came into contact with all of the remnants of the Macedonian Empire that was led by Alexander. Now his generals, the Seleucid Empire and the Antigonid Empire and the Ptolemy empires, were Rome's enemies, and Rome quickly conquers each one of them. And suddenly Rome is now truly not only the master of the Mediterranean, but the master of the Western world. Clearly, Rome establishes one of the first examples in history of true imperialism, complete and total control over foreign lands and peoples, usually for an economic gain. And because Rome was gaining so much territory, it would divide its land up into provinces. Each province would have a governor that reported back to the Republic and to the Senate. And for the most part, conquered peoples were extended citizenship rights. They became Romans, often being expected to serve in the military or in public office. Slowly, the world was becoming more and more Roman. This massive new empire was not only connected by the water routes of the Mediterranean Sea, but an extensive road network that was built as soldiers continued to conquer more areas. And with that, riches flooded into Rome. The rich patrician classes only got wealthier, often building large estates that they called latifundia. Similar to the modern concept of plantations, these were large farms that were usually worked by slave or conquered labor, producing valuable goods such as grain, olives, and grapes. And while Rome was truly profiting, this system, however, took jobs away from the plebeians. And in the process, the plebeians flocked to Rome because now their farming jobs were gone, looking for new economic opportunities. So while the early empire seemed to be very successful, it really did leave out the plebeians, and there were many underlying problems. But remember, in theory, the Republic was built to prevent these types of problems and to give the plebeians a voice. That's what the office of tribune was. And there were two tribunes in particular who tried to redistribute land and wealth back to the poor to try to help Rome be more profitable overall. The brothers Tiberius and Gaius Gracchus were subsequent tribunes who attempted to distribute land to poor farmers and provide a number of different programs that would use public funds to give wealth and opportunities back to the peasants. However, the Senate disapproved of their actions and stirred up riots in the streets that ended up killing both of these plebeian heroes. The deaths of Tiberius and Gaius Gracchus exposed the inequalities of the Roman Empire and some of the flaws of the Senate as well. See, while the Senate was meant to prevent people from gaining too much power, so many rich families used it as a way to maneuver to gain for themselves rather than the good of the state. This sparked a series of revolutions and riots that really decimated Rome, and Rome was truly leaderless despite the fact that it had the Senate. It was out of all of this chaos, however, that the perfect opportunity for one voice, one strong leader to emerge occurred. His name was Gaius Julius Caesar, and he came from a wealthy political family and was an ambitious military commander who emerged as consul in 59 BC. Despite his wealthy background, Julius Caesar prided himself on being a man of the people. He tried to be a voice for the plebeians within all of this chaos. And Caesar proved very quickly that he was a shrewd politician. He teamed up with two other powerful individuals in the Senate, Pompey and Crassus. Pompey, who was the other consul, and Crassus, who was a very wealthy individual. And they created the Triumvirate. Triumvirate was an informal agreement between the three of them in which they would work together and manipulate the Senate for their own gain. And what was a very selfish act, Rome became very powerful as a result. But it's truly Julius's ambition that consumes him. He wasn't just content with having Rome as is. He wanted to be in total control. Now, Julius Caesar was also in debt because of all of his political campaigns, and he needed a way to make money. So he convinced the Senate as consul to allow him to attack the unconquered region of Gaul, which is modern-day France and parts of Germany. After a long 9-year campaign, Caesar and his legions officially conquered Gaul, and Julius Caesar was installed as the new governor of Gaul. The conquest of Gaul showcased Caesar's military brilliance as well as the love that his soldiers and the people in general had for him. There's one story I particularly like where Julius Caesar built a long bridge across a river he needed to cross to attack Gaul. And that bridge so symbolically shows Julius's steps into the leader he was going to be, and at the same time also shows Rome's steps even further into becoming an empire. And Caesar's success brought him even more fame and support than he already had. And Pompey, his long ally, saw this and was worried that Julius Caesar was becoming far too powerful. It's for this reason that Pompey and the Senate ordered Julius Caesar that as he returns, he must disband his army and come back to Rome to the Senate. Remember, the goal of the Republic and the goal of the Senate is to keep one man from having too much power. Because of Julius Caesar being a man of the people, and the support he had from the military after all of his success, he was a threat to that concept. Julius Caesar had no intent of complying with the Senate's demands. Caesar and his army arrived outside the Rubicon River, the last boundary before the gates of Rome, and rather than disbanding his army, he boldly crossed the Rubicon, saying, "The die has been cast." Those words would echo for eternity. It shows Julius Caesar's boldness and confidence in himself, as well as his path to becoming a lone wolf, leaving the wolf pack and now trying to seize control for himself. And what ensued was a brutal civil war between Julius Caesar and the armies of the Senate and Pompey. Yet most of the people and most of the army supported Julius Caesar, so because of that, he wins very easily. It's after this civil war in Rome that Julius Caesar utters the famous words, Veni, Vidi, Vici, which in Latin means, I came, I saw, I conquered. And it cements Julius Caesar's legacy as one of the best conquerors and military leaders the world has ever seen. Remember how we discussed that Rome has a backup plan for when things go wrong, where they can install a dictator, one person with complete and total authority? Yeah, Julius Caesar really capitalizes on that. He forces the Senate to make him dictator, and not just dictator for 6 months, dictator for life. And from 48 BC to 44 BC, Julius Caesar would be very successful as dictator and sole ruler in Rome. He brought a number of different changes and reforms to the Roman government and to the people. Remember, he's a man of the people. He created a number of different public works and construction projects that provided jobs to the plebeians who needed them the most. Man of the people. He gave out public land to the poor so that everyone could have a slice of what Rome's success was. And he even created a brand new calendar called the Julian calendar. It's a calendar that will be used in Western Europe for the next 1,000 years. Yet while he was a man of the people and generally was supported, he had his enemies, and he also had his mistakes. After ending civil war in the new Roman province of Egypt, Julius Caesar began spending an increasingly large amount of time in Egypt with his, we'll call her a friend, Cleopatra. With Caesar distracted, the Senate began plotting ways to get rid of him. Again, he had basically destroyed the Senate. He was the opposite of what the Senate stood for. Which is why on March 15th, 44 BC, in an attempt to save the Republic, Roman senators brutally assassinated Julius Caesar on the steps of the Roman Senate. The Senate believed it had just saved itself, killing the wolf who had left the pack. Yet it had actually set in motion a chain of events that were unable to be changed. Rome was now an empire with a single ruler. It's what the people wanted. It's where Rome was at its most successful. The days of the Senate were almost over. Besides, Julius Caesar was, again, a man of the people. When the man of the people dies, people are going to be upset, which is why there's another string of civil wars. In this civil war, the allies of Julius Caesar hunt down and kill the conspirators who killed Julius Caesar. Caesar's supporters were led by Octavian, the nephew of Julius Caesar, who was essentially his son, and Marc Antony, a general of Julius Caesar's and one of his closest friends. The efforts of Octavian and Marc Antony left the Senate in shambles. And now the question remained, who would take over in the wake of the death of Julius Caesar? Both Octavian and Marc Antony believed that they should do so. Many of the people supported Octavian because he was a direct heir to Julius Caesar, while Marc Antony had the support of many members of the military and even the old friend of Julius Caesar, Cleopatra, who becomes Marc Antony's friend too. The war between Marc Antony and Octavian culminated in the Battle of Actium in 31 BC in Egypt, as Octavian and his forces were able to overtake Marc Antony and Cleopatra's. When Octavian returned triumphantly to Rome, the Senate gave him the title Augustus, or Exalted One, and declared him the Princeps, or First Citizen. The term Caesar would later become synonymous with king. In the process, Octavian, or Augustus, was now the heir to Julius Caesar's throne. He is Rome's first true emperor. Augustus will rule from 31 BC to about 14 AD, and the 500-year run that the Senate had is now over. But under Augustus and subsequent emperors, Rome experienced an intense period of growth and peace called the Pax Romana, 200 years of peace in Roman lands. Augustus continued many of Julius's reforms, greater organizing Rome, and in the process bringing strength and honor back to the government. He also issued Rome's first census, or a track and record of how many people were living in Rome and the entire empire and where, so that Rome could more easily tax its citizens and have a steady stream of income. Rome takes on this identity as a true empire with emperors. And Rome certainly had its share of good emperors. In fact, there were 5 of them in particular. The Roman emperor Nerva protected civil liberties and the rights of all people. Trajan expanded and ruled Rome at its greatest height, and his many militaristic conquests are still commemorated in Rome today with Trajan's Column in downtown Rome. Emperor Hadrian codified and rewrote Roman laws while also protected Rome's conquest, building Hadrian's Wall at the boundary of Rome's empire in England. The Emperor Antonius Pius ruled during the most peaceful time in all of Roman history and increased Rome's economy. And finally, Marcus Aurelius, considered to be Rome's last great emperor, was also known as the philosopher king and protected Rome's gains and conquests. Under the reign of these 5 good emperors, specifically Trajan, Rome's empire reached its height, truly dominating every land surrounding the Mediterranean Sea. But unfortunately, more often than not, Roman emperors were more on the bad side. They were exactly what the Senate had warned about for centuries, about what terrible things happen when you give somebody too much power. Take, for example, the Roman Emperor Caligula, who was so insane he named his horse consul of the Roman military. I'll say that again. He named his horse consul of the Roman military. Of course, there's the other insane emperor, Nero, who persecuted Christians and Jews and allegedly started the fire that burned down Rome as he watched and sang. And of course, there's Commodus, too, who threw massive gladiatorial games to celebrate his becoming emperor and even fought as a gladiator himself, often fixing many of the fights. You can see more about that in the movie Gladiator. Most of it's kind of inaccurate, but it's still a good look at ancient Rome. Whether good or bad, Roman emperors recognized where their power came from. It did come from the people. If they had the support of the people, they could do whatever they wanted. And they also knew people loved to be entertained. So whether it was gladiatorial fights in the famous Colosseum or chariot races in the Circus Maximus, the equivalent to medieval NASCAR, Roman emperors would often adopt a policy of bread and circuses. They would give out free grain. They would have these big parties and entertainment events in an attempt to distract the people from the problems that Rome actually had. And for centuries, this actually worked. Yet overall, this describes the major flaws of the Roman Empire. It's exactly what the Senate warned about. It's what happens when you give one person too much power. Sure, if it's the right person, Maybe for a time, like in the case of a 6-month dictator, it's what you need for the success of the state. Or if you have a good ruler like Caesar Augustus or Marcus Aurelius, your empire can thrive during that time. Absolute power corrupts absolutely. And once again, it shows us these fundamental truths that people are sinful and really all about themselves. It's just like a wolf pack. When Romans put aside their differences and came together, the Senate was at its best, and it allowed Rome to flourish as this empire. But Rome's eventual downfall, which we'll unpack later on, is truly a result of giving one wolf too much power. The lone wolf will be the demise of Rome. And that's true for all of us. We try to go through everything on our own, and our lives are going to be unsuccessful and pretty empty. Rome's downfall will be because one too many wolves were given too much power. And Rome truly forgets that the strength of the pack is in the wolf, but the strength of the wolf is in the pack. But that's a story for another day. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.